This must be some rendition of the original basilica that was here. And just some random shards of the exterior sculpturing perhaps. And here a pretty one. When you look at these, you have to somehow try to expand what you see into, number one, perfection of its original creation, and then two, to its dimension throughout the church, and see if you can't get some sense of the beauty of the whole church. That's a very hard thing to do. Some of the mosaic tile. Did it naturally curve right there, downward, or it appears that it does, that there's no cracks that I can see. Here we're looking at some kind of a reconstruct of the basilica. And I wonder if these 4 columns we see here, if this is one of those columns. There's one behind me, to the right also. Could the person who was buried in that hole underneath that floor have imagined that it would take several centuries? That included the destruction of his church and the rebuilding of a church several feet above it before someone would choose to dig back down and find him and expose him again? So their immortality was almost quite fleeting had it not been for this excavation. Here it's interesting, there are 5 pills. Is this somehow reminiscent of the Medici family? Here another floor level, but notice that it's made up of shards of obviously prior worked stone that probably existed for another purpose in another place. There's another piece of worked stone right there. Was this done in a financially difficult period of time? Or was it in an area that didn't require much public notice? Different designs of tile work. Here used for writing purposes. The indentations, I suspect, were the result of weight over time and water. They are smooth. An old column. The remains of an old column. Is it in this position in situ simply because it was the way it was found? That might have been a very pretty symbol picture, if you will, and when it was original brick and cement wall. Here, still later, numbers more recent. Always get confused by those terms. Floor surface. I just wonder if the deceased, before they deceased, played any kind of role in the selection and the preparation of their future eternal whole. This is interesting. It's the claw of a bird holding a sphere. But notice the 6 little balls. Or could this have been in the time of the Medici or a direct precursor to the Medici? I just don't know the history that well. Same here, the 6 pills. And this certainly implies that they had sarcophaguses, unless it's illustrating the exact elevation that this burial was placed. Some examples of some of the early sculpturing. Notice the detail work required in the borders of these on the bottom and to the left. Presumably in Brunelleschi's time, a crack was detected in the nave, presumably the the ceiling of the nave, and he developed a metal tie rod and wood system for containing that. Presumably that's what these tie rods are, his design. You would have thought he would have found that aesthetically offensive, yet a pragmatic necessity. They have opened up this area of the apse or of the cathedral so I can get underneath the dome. Notice that there's a crack. I'll turn the camera so you can see it running almost vertical in the center frame. I suppose, had we the time and interest, we could decipher all that's up there. But I'm going to just slowly turn in an attempt to be able to see this if in fact I ever want to. I don't fall over. These are the transepts. This is the left transept, which would be to the north. And I'm guessing that those little chapel things are the dead tribunes. Tribunes were simply half-domed areas that provided some degree of support. And this is the right one. My notes indicate a terracotta tribunes, but I can't see or find those. Maybe it's on the exterior. The main altar was sculpted by Brunelleschi. I don't know if that's this portion right here where the crucifix is. It seems to be the most substantial as compared to this table-like structure to the left and the whatever it is way at the back of the apse. We can't go any farther, so I'll let the camera do it for me. I don't know if this portion is called the choir or not. I don't see any choir like Donatello's or Robbia's that we saw in the Duomo Museum that would be perched on a wall. This is just creates an inner area around the main altar. Just an interestingly lit view of the interior. Notice the very elaborate clerestory walkway. And equally interesting is that clock, I think it is. Never seen anything like it, and take me some time to decipher what it's doing. Apparently, Ghiberti was the designer of many of the stained glass windows in this church. It's interesting that each one, like this over the tympanum, the main entrance on the west side of the church, will go totally unnoticed. Even I, taking a video, have no real clue of what it is, although I think it's Mary. But we will never get a chance to really get close and see it and understand what the elements were. This is as close as most will ever get. And I'm not sure how well this is coming out because I see some shakiness occurring. We'll try it again. But we'll never get close enough to appreciate the skill of that medium. Notice here that three-dimensional look that I forget who the artist was that was referred to as having created this three-dimensional idea in a wall, but in a floor, and then another we saw yesterday used it in a wall to create a sense of distance. I think the optical illusion here is that as you stand on the outside of this circle, you would be in the same view as you would be standing underneath the edge of a dome that was built like this, or like the Pantheon. And that the further up you looked, which was away from you at an angle, you might see less and less of those little walls. Interesting that it's also a storage